Well, hello everyone. I'm Edmund Bradford. I'm a director of the Good Growth Academy, and in the series of short videos on marketing and sustainability, I'm delighted as ever to be joined by Stephen Mangum, who is a branding expert, much more of a branding expert than I will ever be, and also a master at Masters of Scale International. Now, in the previous videos, we've talked about, sustainability and the kind of how it fits into the broad concept of good growth. We've talked about how it can be a real differentiator in the marketplace. But in this particular one, I think we're going to get down to more of a human level and talk about the poor person at the center of this from our perspective in many ways, which is the Chief Marketing Officer. Now, Stephen, I think what's interesting to me, I've been in marketing for 25, 30 years or something, and I'm fairly new to sustainability, in comparison at least. And I think what I found interesting is how very little, in most companies, marketing seems to be involved in the whole sustainability conversation. They just don't seem to be at the party. They're sometimes at the end doing the brochures and the messaging about all the changes that the company's doing, but they seem to be like an add-on at the end rather than central to the whole journey. So it'd be interesting to get your perspective, Stephen, on how can the CMO, a Chief Marketing Officer, how can they get involved and how can they start driving and leading some of this change if they can at all?
Good to be on again, Ed. I think it does start with, if you like, the board, the C-suite. They need to have define the sustainability conversation in terms of the customer, and that's when the CMO can help. So if their sustainability agenda is inherently customer focused, customer centric, what is the purpose of our business, our brand, what is its usefulness, and that has to be a customer facing conversation. If you start there, then the CMO has a chance of success, and the CMO is engaged. What the CMO themselves have to do is there's a number of things, but perhaps three most important things. First of all, I think it's important that they, as the CMO, need to define the brand in terms of the brand's usefulness, or inherent usefulness. So they need to, as I mentioned in an earlier video, they need to put sustainability at the heart of the brand strategy. And to do that, they may need to look at various disruptive approaches where they look to reframe the business they're in, or their role in it. So, for example, Tesla famously say they're not in the car business; they're in the renewable energy business. They just happen to be cars are a particular way which they can make a contribution to that agenda. So that's number one: is they need to reframe the brand in terms of its inherent usefulness to consumers. What is its social purpose? Secondly, I think it's important then that there's an organizing concept, an organizing idea that inspires and guides the brand behavior and the brand action, so that the integrated marketing communications is consistent with that. And then I guess the third thing is that they should have a plan. They should have a plan that says, okay, measurable objectives, and what's our plan of action to get there. So I'd say that that's what CMOs can do from their perspective to drive good growth. And
I think what are some of the, let's just pick up maybe one or two of the sort of the key challenges that they're going to face. I think for me an obvious one is their just understanding of the subject. I mean, we don't expect CMOs to be sustainability experts.
Yep.
So what do you think could be some of the first steps that they take in just getting their heads around this subject, getting educated in this area? Just get any thoughts on that?
Well, listen and learn. There's a lot of expertise out there. There's a lot of informed opinion. I recently read a book, not looking to plug it particularly, called Greener Marketing, which is a fantastic place to start in terms of helping someone reassess the role of marketing in promoting the sustainability agenda and creating that good growth. So,
yeah, excellent. And yeah, if we're doing book plugs, I think the one I really like is Rethinking Capitalism by Rebecca Henderson. It's not about marketing, but it's a very good business book, and I completely agree, Stephen. I think the first thing we should do as marketers in a way is just get educated a little bit about the subject, and picking up a good book and getting your head around it. Looking for short courses, attending events. I'll give a little plug here to some of them. For example, Economist runs really good events. There's some really good speakers, including Unilever, by the way, that we mentioned at some of these events. So without much of an outlay and without committing yourself to a whole year of a master's on sustainability, you can actually get yourself up to speed with what some of the key concepts are. So there's definitely an education challenge, I think, but they don't need to become experts. They just need to know the basics, I would say. The other challenge, I suppose, Stephen, what about, let's talk about the real challenge there, where you've got a board that isn't that receptive to the green agenda. Any thoughts there about how can the marketing chief marketing officer or marketing official, how can they use the power of the customer, if you like, to try and influence how the board might think about it?
Well, I think the answer lies in your question. The power of the customer. If I was a CMO, I'd be showing as I said in an earlier video, there's a wealth of evidence out there that consumers prefer products that have an articulated social purpose agenda. So there's some very strong business arguments to be made to the board to say we can grow our business, we can protect our business by pursuing this agenda. So it's not simply a nice to have or some form of do-gooding CSR exercise. It can be a very hard-headed doing good is good for business agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one thing I liked about the examples that Rebecca Henderson talked about is that actually what we get to the point of doing is saying actually the risk of doing nothing is more dangerous than the risk of doing something. And the status quo and the do nothing option is no longer on the table. These changes are happening and we need to respond to them.
Absolutely. I mean, it's an old saying, if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing. And there are plenty of disruptors in business today who will eat your lunch if you take the soft approach and do nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, that's a whole area, isn't it, of competitiveness. I mean, we talked about the power of the customer, but the other area that the chief marketing officer should be very attuned with is the competitor activity. And there's a danger in any industry, I think, that the organisation that does the least is left behind in the marketplace and suffers accordingly.
Absolutely. I mean, brands grow or don't on memorability and relevance. And if you're not memorable because you've got nothing particularly strong to say, if you're not relevant, you're going to wither on the vine.
Well, that's excellent, Stephen. That's all we got time for now. But in our final little video in this series, we're going to just pick up on this subject a little bit more and talk about the tricky issue of implementation. So thank you very much again, Stephen, for your support on this, and look forward to our next video together.
My pleasure.